The energy transition has been a topic for many years, and we're making great strides in the United States particularly. But one missing piece that doesn't get a lot of attention is after you add all these renewables and after the battery storage systems are online, what else do you need? And reciprocating engines is one technology that can fill that gap.
Your trusted source for information on the energy transition. This is the Insider's Guide to Energy podcast. Hello, Energy Leader. This is Chris Sass, host of the Insider's Guide to Energy, and I asked for just a few moments of your time to make you aware of a brand new program that I think you'll be excited about. The program is called Podcast Power, Media Training for Energy Leaders. You're probably already aware that podcasts are a dominant force in the media today. As an executive in the energy space, you are often asked to be a guest on a podcast, and your legacy media training leaves a lot of gaps in the skills you need to be successful on a podcast. Common sense doesn't always do it. And to avoid these pitfalls, Insider's Guide to Energy has partnered with the Antenna Group and their media trainers to create a hands-on interactive 2-day workshop designed for executives in the energy and clean tech space specifically. You'll get all the skills you need to have successful interviews and to reach the audience you intend to reach. So whether you're reaching out to customers, future employees, or investors, this is the class for you. Space is limited to the first 10, and those that are selected will get the opportunity to be a guest on the Insider's Guide to Energy, practicing your new skills. Welcome to another edition of the Insider's Guide to Energy. I'm your host, Chris Sass, and with me is our co-host, Jeff McAulay. Jeff, we're talking generation today?
Yeah, really exciting and important backbone of the grid and lots of locations around the world. So we are excited to have Jon Rodriguez with us today, the Energy Business Director for Engine Power Plants for Wärtsilä North America. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here, Jeff and Chris.
So to start off, I know I'm probably not saying the name perfectly, but this is a very important brand in power generation, although not necessarily a household name. So tell us a little bit more about Wärtsilä and the applications around the world.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Jeff. Wärtsilä, that's the easy way to say it, I think. That's the way I say it most times, is a Finnish company. So in Finland is where the company was started, and it's actually 190 years old. We just had our 190-year anniversary in 2024. Started as a sawmill. Obviously, back then, there were no such thing as power generation, and it's transformed into one of the world leader OEMs in the power generation space and also in the marine sector, providing engines to vessels around the world.
That's great. And when we talk about engines, these are large piston reciprocating engine, spark or compression ignition. What kind of fuels? Just paint us a picture, because I don't think people have generally seen engines this big.
Agreed. Frankly, as an engine guy myself, I spent a lot of my career with what I thought were large engines. I'm talking about 69-liter V16 engines produced by, more common names like Cummins or Caterpillar, those kinds of companies. And I came to Wärtsilä, and the engines are 10 times bigger. And the engines, even though they're bigger, fundamentally, they operate extremely similarly, but with that size, we're able to have very flexible fuel capabilities. And so diesel, heavy fuel oil, which is a fuel that you're probably not super familiar with in traditional sense, but also natural gas, and then a lot of alternatives that are related to those types of fuels.
Now, I've know from past experience that a lot of the Caribbean islands use diesel generators or maybe even bunker fuel type generation. Are these places where I'd find your solution?
That is one place where you'd be sure to find our solution. We have about a 80 to 90% market share in the power generation space throughout the Caribbean. So I'm talking about all those different countries, those little islands, for the most part, are powered by Wärtsilä machines.
All right. But if I turn the clock forward,
burn bunker fuel.
So you burn bunker fuel, you power these small island nations. But the conversation we're going to have today is forward looking and talking about some inflection. Where are your generators coming into play in an energy transition world?
Well, thankfully for me, having a job here, we're a very big part of that transition. So we are actually getting bigger and bigger in the energy space in developed countries like the United States and Europe and other places around the world that have made a huge effort to decarbonize their grids, to retire very inefficient coal and inefficient from a thermal perspective, but also from an emissions perspective, lots and lots of carbon emissions from a coal plant. And the Wärtsilä engines burning natural gas can be ran as clean as any other technology, and can meet the most strict requirements for air emissions in the United States. And so what these engines are doing is creating a new future for the power generation space, where we're going to flip the base load around from base load being large coal plants around the country to the renewables themselves. And these Wärtsilä engines can then balance those renewables when they're being intermittent in their generation, and then allow those renewables to continue being the base load and the grid to be reliable, resilient, and the grid that we're used to, where you just flip a light and nobody knows where that electricity came from.
So, Jon, it sounds like there are two types of transitions you're talking about. One, in terms of moving from a baseload generation to more flexible balancing or peaking, and two, in the types of fuel, from the dirtier heavy fuel oil or bunker fuel to a cleaner burning natural gas. Are there other fuels that are either being blended in or you can transition beyond natural gas?
Yes, the reciprocating engine as a concept has an innate ability, an inherent ability to burn lots of different things. And so we have, extensive R&D efforts going to maximize the engine's capability to burn methanol, ethanol, ammonia, fuels you frankly haven't heard of before. Hydrogen is another one. And the ability to burn both liquid state fuels and gaseous state. So that flexibility allows utilities or people that have generation fleets to have security in the future that they're going to have an asset that can be performing for as long as it feasibly can run, and no matter what kind of fuel mix turns out to be the future.
And those innovations will apply both for your stationary fleet, but also for marine. You mentioned the same types of engines are used in large shipping applications, correct?
Yes, correct. In the marine sector, they certainly focus on liquid fuels just because of bunkering, and they need to have space on the vessel to hold the fuel during the transit. But we're able to take all the advancements done in the marine sector and apply them to land-based generation, so that fuel mix capability is just basically, completely open at this point. And whatever those future fuels happen to be for clients, for future clients, we'll be able to operate with those fuels.
I heard a lot of future fuels. We talked about ammonia and hydrogen. There's a lot of bet for some on that. There's a lot of people that don't believe in green ammonia and green hydrogen. But our audience generally is energy transition. And you said business is going gangbusters. Folks want your generation. Help me understand exactly how this is leading towards a greener future, right? So we're putting some sort of baseload in. Is it because of the variability of renewables that we're just not having enough storage and we're thinking generation's the way to go? Or is it something else, maybe from your perspective?
Well, it's a combination of those things, and battery storage as a technology certainly has a role in especially places with significant solar generation resources, because obviously solar is extremely predictable through the movement of the sun. You know exactly when it's going to set, you know exactly when it's going to rise. When you're talking about wind generation, it's very much more unpredictable and intermittent. And that's where you really have to have firm, flexible, dispatchable technologies that can turn on when you need them, because you can't just tell the wind to blow and you don't know when, and so from a battery deployment perspective, it's very difficult to apply a battery into a wind heavy sector. So this technology and being able to run for more than a few hours, basically indefinitely if needed, is a need for the grid, and we're talking about large grids in the United States in general. For instance, ERCOT in Texas just had their new peak established around 85 gigawatts, and about 27 gigawatts of that is wind. And so they've got tremendous variability in their generation fleet, and they need assets that can turn on when needed to take care of the people of Texas. They have to have power. It's become a need in our society to have electricity, and these kinds of technologies, like these large reciprocating engines, are a very present capability to take care of these requirements today, and then they're flexible in the future so that whatever the fuel mix turns out to be, we can adapt to that. So you asked, how do these technologies actually help reduce carbon emissions? And that's really the allowing the renewables to generate to their maximum potential. That's the beauty. Today in California, for instance, they have so much solar that they could actually power their whole grid with solar, but the grid would fall apart. It can't sustain itself with only solar. You have to have these generation assets spinning, burning natural gas or fuel oil or whatever. They also have nuclear, of course, but you can't just rely on the solar. And so what's going on is California, as an ISO, is actually relying on its neighbors to stay viable. So when they have too much solar, they push it to their neighbor. Their neighbor actually sometimes is receiving money to receive energy because California has to get rid of it. So what you need to be able to do is use the renewable energy when it's available, when it's being generated, and then have resources that can respond when it's not available. And that could be a blend of battery storage technologies, long duration storage, but also you're going to have firm dispatchable generation to make up the gap when those other resources are depleted.
Jon, tell us about speed, scale, and siting. So when you talk about power plants, these are not your 500 megawatt, gigawatt coal plants. This is a more bite-sized scale, which I'm guessing enables you to have faster deployment and more precise siting. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's another inherent advantage of reciprocating engines is their size scale. So roughly, let's just say 20 megawatts each engine. Now that's not tiny, and like we said, these things weigh close to over 400 tons actually each one. So they're a significant utility grade type of equipment, but they're very very scalable. And that 20 megawatt block, it makes a lot of sense from the 100 to 400 megawatt range. And that is frankly where we're seeing the most amount of demand. But what's great about that size is it is utility scale. It is front of the meter type, utility grade equipment, but it's also small enough where you can now distribute it along your transmission and distribution system and avoid, the issues we're having today with that exact thing. As renewables are being added, it's straining the transmission and distribution system because you have all this power being made somewhere where there's not a lot of load. Reciprocating engine plants can be sited wherever you want them, and they can go very close to load pockets and help you alleviate constraints on your transmission system.
So other than alleviating constraints, are people using these for financial gain? Are they watching the energy market and bidding into the market and turning on these generators at certain price points? So if in a quarter hour, if there's a price point that makes sense, are they bidding in with your units?
Yes, we do have customers that participate in the marketplace, ERCOT, MISO, SPP, and so on. And yes, these generation assets are bid into the market just like every other generation asset. And they do allow customers not only to, if they have a for-profit model, they can certainly try to be a merchant player and make money. And we definitely have some customers doing that. But I would say for the most part, we have utilities that are nonprofit. They're not motivated by profit. They're motivated by cost constraint and providing reliability to their customers. And what these assets can provide is a physical hedge against risk. So when you hear about ERCOT or some market having prices spike to the roof for power, you can have these assets in your fleet respond when that price is unreasonable, and then you can protect your ratepayer, your members from that price volatility.
Jon, tell us about the differentiation to other types of generation, whether that's a gas turbine or micro turbine or fuel cell. There's a whole variety of different generators. Where does the reciprocating engine fit in as compared to those?
Yes, good question. Thank you. So as far as gas turbines, that's a pretty big pretty big spectrum. We have industrial grade turbines in the 10 to 20 megawatt range, but then I'd say where we really compete the most is with a type of technology called aeroderivatives, which is basically they get that name because the gas engine prime mover is the same relative design as what you see on an airplane, and those are about 50 megawatts each. The larger gas turbines, H-frames or F-frame turbines, 200, 400 megawatts plus, those are very inflexible machines, meaning they take a long time to start, they take a long time to turn off, and in between those running periods, you have to be very careful because of thermal expansion. Aeroderivative technology has some inherent flexibility characteristics where they can start rapidly, ramp to load, and then be turned off relatively quickly. But where reciprocating engines create differentiation is that we have significantly faster time, and we have no penalty, if you will, on a maintenance schedule for how many times you start how many times you start. So basically, if the market demands require you to start 10 times a day, that is okay with our technology, and you will not see a significant increase in your maintenance expense.
What are the lead times on a big heavy piece of equipment like this to get one? So let's say someone's listening to this and saying, "Hey, that sounds great." Are we looking 12 months out, 24 months out? How long does it take to get one of these built?
Yeah, we're actually very proud right now that we have probably the best lead time in the industry. We're looking at roughly 9 to 12 months to get the engine to the site. And then it takes, let's say, another 6 months to finish the power plant, the integration. And so within really the most aggressive schedule, anywhere from 12 to 18 months to actually have an operational plant.
Do you need to know when you order the engine or the motor what kind of fuel you intend to burn, or is it something they can change in the field very quickly? So based on availability and what the cost of whatever fuel might be.
No, you need to know from the beginning. Yeah.
So when I want to change to hydrogen or ammonia or something like that in the future, what kind of retrofit is that?
It's relatively minor, actually. We're able to actually burn hydrogen blended with natural gas without any modifications to the engines you would buy that would burn natural gas normally. But if you wanted to burn 100% hydrogen, you would have to change certain components within the engine, and the block, the generator, the radiators, everything else would remain. You would just do some changes of pieces on the top end of the engine, we call it, cylinder heads, piston crowns, for instance. Maybe some of the air intake system might need to be modified, but that would be about the extent of it. So we would consider that an in situ, if you will, in place modification that could be completed for any of those various fuels we've been discussing.
All right, Jon, I got to ask some gearhead questions here. I was in an automotive lab in grad school. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with engines. There's been exhaust gas recycling, there's been in-cylinder reforming, and there are a lot of really neat attributes about blending hydrogen in terms of flame speed and lean gas mixture. What would you add in the sort of R&D side of things for some of our more nerdy engine gearheads out there?
I would say an advancement, as a fellow gearhead, an advancement that as far as a capability that I was unaware of until I came to Wärtsilä and became familiar with our engine products, is the ability to control every single cylinder combustion event individually. So on any automotive scale engine or up to those 69 liter, fairly large diesel engines, you're still monitoring and inserting natural gas fuel to the entire engine at once. At Wärtsilä, every single cylinder has an individual injection control, its own ECU, basically monitoring every aspect of that combustion event. And what this allows us to do is actually turn down or have very low partial load down to 10% of nameplate and operate completely steady and in emissions compliance. And that second part is very important because you need heat to keep your emissions compliance going. And how we accomplish that is through skip firing and by inducing heat in the exhaust by just injecting extra fuel we don't need. But from a gearhead perspective, it's spectacularly cool.
Thank you for indulging. That sounds really neat. And the emissions, using that technology to get better emissions, lower turn down, very exciting, which helps you in these sort of idle and then fast ramp capabilities, which sounds like a really great partner fuel. People talk about natural gas as a bridge, but really this sounds like a partnership where you have that fast ramping, dynamic, geographic kind of flexibility. Tell us about where you're seeing orders around the world. I imagine you've got certainly a neat perch within North America, but zoom out a little bit. Where is that global demand happening?
So we're seeing very strong demand in the United States. So I'm very happy about that. And we're supporting this energy transition that we're all a part of as US citizens. Globally, I'd say that you still see a very big disparity between developing countries and developed countries. So in developing countries, if such as in the Caribbean, if they're seeing load growth, they're still buying heavy fuel oil engines. Unfortunately, they don't have the economic capability to move to more green fuels, if you will, or more carbon friendly fuels, such as natural gas even. Where we're also seeing tremendous uptick in demand is in the data center realm. And this is global. Data centers and the transition to AI seems to be, and I'm a pretty technical person, but AI is mystical to me because somehow they're building data centers that have tremendously larger power demands. And those power demands are challenging from the power generation sector for two reasons. One is the scale. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of megawatts per site. And the second reason is apparently these things will cycle, meaning your power demand isn't steady. It can go up and down with very rapid up and down. So from a power generation perspective, that's a big challenge. Thankfully, Wärtsilä engines are seen as a very good solution for the data center space to take care of all these challenges. We traditionally have not been a player in the standby market in data centers because the equipment is made to be utility scale and utility grade. But the scale increase and the power demand requirements for these new data center developments are beyond the local utilities' ability to serve. That is a very new scenario in the United States. And you're seeing that same trend in Europe.
Jon, so if I'm hearing you right, this is almost like a behind the meter peaker where you have such a large load, it might not fit within the grid connection. And so they need on-site generation, not for backup, but actually for ramped higher loads.
Actually, you're correct. And in a couple of ways. One, it is more than the grid might have the capability to serve in a particular location. In that case, they're still going ahead with developing these data centers, but instead of getting that utility interconnect, they're going to do baseload power locally.
Now, is one of the direct future competitors as we go through this energy transition SMRs? Is that who your main competitor will be over the next 10 years, let's say, for this kind of a technology?
I don't think so. SMRs, in my estimation, are several years away from being commercially competitive. Of course, they have, the great advantage of no carbon emittance. But from a cost perspective and let's say technology maturation, it doesn't seem to be a relevant player in the next 5 to 10 years that I understand. Where we do see direct competition is in the gas turbine world. They're a very capable technology. We just feel we've got a few attributes and are a little bit better at certain things. So we're definitely competing with them on every deal.
Awesome.
Jon, well, this has really been a very interesting journey. We talked about a technology that doesn't get a lot of play. It's under the hood of a lot of our cars, but great to see how a scaled up version can help enable the energy transition in remote islands in the US and all around the world. So thanks for being a guide for this journey. Really appreciated the conversation.
You're welcome, guys. It was a pleasure.
For our audience, we're completing another episode of the Insider's Guide to Energy. I know from past experience, there's going to be comments in both our YouTube and on our LinkedIn that we're talking about these kind of engines that burn things. Feel free to leave comments, leave your opinions there. We'll get back to you. And we look forward to seeing you again next time on the Insider's Guide to Energy. Bye for now.